Hi, this is Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the President, Founder, and Chief Listening Officer here at our network at USA Global TV and Radio. Thank you so much for your loyalty. Thank you so much to all of our guests, to our team members, to our sponsors, and to all of our elevated listeners. Here at USA Global TV and Radio, we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. We celebrate all of our team members, all of our guests, and all of our sponsors from around the world who come and lead their lives with their hearts to help other people walk into their greatness. If you'd like to be a guest on any of our shows, please go over to our website, usaglobaltv.com, and book your session. Please contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com and subscribe to our channel.
As always, getting ready to start and something happens at the last minute, and it happened. It is what it is. Regardless, we're getting ready to start. Red O'Loughlin here on the USA Global TV and Radio Network Talking Heads show. We start out the year talking about toxins and health, and we're at today number 3 out of 6. And we're talking about how toxins affect us. And back in I'm going to say about 75, one of the big singers back there, Randy Newman, had a song called Chicken Man. You know, Chicken Man, he's everywhere. And when I start looking at toxins, literally, they're everywhere. In just about every part of our life, it's almost impossible not to come in contact with eating them, breathing them, touching them. It doesn't matter. And unfortunately, some of those toxins are forever toxins. We're not going to do a thing about it. We can't. It's impossible. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm not a doctor, never have been, never worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a researcher. It's what I have done most of my adult life in various forms. I'm trying to bring up slide number 1 here. There we go. And I love to research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I fell in love with chemistry back in the 60s when I was a sophomore in high school. First time I talked, it answered the questions of why. I just had to have this reason. Why do these things happen? And all of a sudden, chemistry answered a lot of those things. Math is another one that, this does this. It's fairly constant. Chemistry, you get down right to the atomic level. And I just found that fascinating. It's so fascinating. I got a degree in it. I wanted to be a chemist. Unfortunately, I got an invitation to Vietnam, and then my whole world changed after that. My wife came down with breast cancer not quite 10 years ago, and I changed from being a presenter publicly of self-improvement, motivation, self-esteem. I had a couple of books in that area, selling them at the back of the room at my mentors' events. And when I started researching things for my wife's breast cancer, chemo symptoms, side effects, I'm thinking, I kind of like this a whole lot more than motivation and self-improvement. And so I spent a lot of time doing the research in those areas. We fixed a lot of things that could be fixed, and eventually ameliorated everything down to so she could survive the chemo and eventually survive the radiation. And at that same time, I said, I'm going to delve off into the area of what can we do about our health? And more importantly, what can we do about our health when we age? And I have a couple of books when talking about how does disease get into the body and what can we do about it? And more importantly, how do we age? What are some of the secrets of what can we do to accelerate or decelerate the aging processes? Regardless, those are things we'll cover down the road. But for today, we're going to go ahead and continue on the topic of toxins. And toxins, they say the technical definition is a naturally occurring organic poison. But we know that there's so many things out there that are not organic. Lead, for instance, that is just as much as a toxin as anything else. And so anything that affects our bodies in some way, shape, or form can be considered a toxin. And so today we're going to talk about a particular reference, the Environmental Working Group, EWG.org. There's a lot of other ones. You put in any kind of reference that you want. Let's say reference food and toxins, or reference cleaning solvents and toxins, reference baby shampoo and toxins. there's a lot of ways out there, a lot of different databases. We talked in the last couple sessions about MSDS, material safety data sheets. Those are things that if you're working in an environment, your company is supposed to provide access to anything that you're using in that particular world, whether it's in the garage, in an office, in the car you're in. They're supposed to have material safety data sheets for every single chemical that you come in contact with on a daily basis. That's just part of the law. But when we're looking at things that are not so similar, what else do we have? Well, one of the sites that I use a lot, and it's so much stuff there, you get lost in it. Sometimes we go down these little rabbit holes, and all of a sudden, well, that hole looks pretty nice. You go down that one for a while, and well, let me go over and try. And this is one of those sites that if you fall in love with it, you're going to find out there's just so many different things there. In this particular one, ewg.org, their mission statement there, I don't have to read it. It's a pretty standard, but you click on who we are, a lot of things there. Areas of focus is the area that we're going to be going to. Consumer guides, they have consumer guides for so many different things. Anywhere in here that they have a reference to something, it's detailed, has the links to it. It shows the keywords that apply to it. The research articles are there. Lots and lots and lots of things that are available in that. So what are the areas of focus that are available in that today? Well, we're looking at food and water, farming, agriculture, personal care, household and consumer products, toxic chemicals, family health, believe it or not, energy, and regional issues. And each one of these things, they have articles and they have guides. So let's say you go into food and water, and you can go down to a particular one, and there may be an article or 3 articles, or if you want to look at all the articles that are there. And if you go into the guides, they'll have a guide there saying, well, this is what we have, the 2019 guide for whatever particular toxic chemical you're looking for or product level. And then if you're looking at the research, they'll pull you back into the 1950s or 60s or wherever the research started, and you can look at every single release of something from the FDA or any other government agents that said, this is what we are concerned about right now. And so you can pull up the original documentation. It's truly amazing what's out there. I pulled up one here on the drinking water, and they allowed me to put in my zip code 77459. And what they said is legal does not equal safe. Well, in this particular case here, they're saying that arsenic, a fairly common mineral, very toxic if you get it at high enough levels. They're saying that in this particular case, the legal limit is 10 parts per billion. But in my utility district, they're at 0.7 parts per billion. That sounds like that's a pretty good reduction. That's under 10%. But when you look at what is the real health guideline, you're looking at 0.004 parts per billion. So 0.004 is a far cry from 0.710. So it's like 4 divided by 710. That's how small that amount is. Arsenic isn't one of those things that grows up. So in my drinking water here, yes, they clean it according to legal levels, but it doesn't necessarily make it safe. A lot of things that are toxic cannot be removed from the water. Pharmaceutical chemicals, for instance, it's not one of those things they remove, or the level of their removal are not adequate in order to satisfy a true safety perspective. So that was one I pulled up just for me to take a look at what's going on here in my area. And ironically, I think there's about 24 chemicals they had that they listed, and some of them are pretty small amounts. Some of them are in that category. Well, they may cause cancer if you get enough of them, but generally speaking, it's a pretty safe water supply. But there's nothing in there that's really and truly safe if you want the word safe to mean safe. If I'm looking at toxins and I want to look at particular waters, now this is further down in that water part. It says water filters that can reduce contaminant levels. Well, arsenic. Well, I look up there and it has activated charcoal as one of the filters. Well, activated charcoal cannot remove arsenic. Reverse osmosis and ion exchange can. But then I come down to atrazine. Well, activated charcoal can remove atrazine, but an ion exchange cannot. So it tells you that in this particular case, the best water filter to have is reverse osmosis, because it will remove most of the common contaminants that I have in my drinking water where I live. So not only does it tell me what toxins I have, it tells me to what levels I have those toxins, what is the legal level, what is the considered safe level, and what can I do about it? What options do I have? And so from that perspective, I thought that's kind of a neat thing to know. So you start wandering around the rabbit hole and you can go down all sorts of things. Well, they have these things called forever chemicals. It was never intended to be that way. But these chemicals that are formed can't be broken down. Usually sunlight will break down some of them. Some of them you can put into a water filter system. Sometimes you can treat them a certain way. But chemicals that can't be broken down are called forever chemicals. And generally, there's a bunch of them, but they're kind of lumped under one general category, PFAS, per, PER, or poly, fluoroalkyl chemicals. These are chemicals that have a very, very strong carbon and fluorine bond. And so when you have those kinds of chemicals, there's over 9,000 of them, they are very difficult to get rid of, but they help our society in many, many ways. The only problem is we didn't prepare for the disposal of them, the detoxification of them. They end up in landfills. They end up in all sorts of places. They end up in a lot of the clothing we wear, the products that we use, chemicals we put on our bodies, chemicals that hold our food, and they get absorbed into our skin. We breathe them in, we eat them in. There's just so many different things. But two of the most common PFAS chemicals, one's called PFOS, polyfluorooctane sulfonate, and PFOA, perfluorooctanoic acid, also called C8. Those are very, very common PFASs. And when you start looking at these can't be broken down anyway. They're just there. And so when we find them in fabric and leather coatings, household cleaners, firefighting, stain-resistant carpet. I'm sure, I know I have an umbrella that's kind of worn out a little bit, and you get this spray that will make them waterproof. You spray that stuff on. Well, that's a PFAS, because that's one of the things that they're doing with those particular kinds of chemicals. Well, they've been phased out for a couple decades now. I mean, there's regulations in an industry that says you're not supposed to use these anymore. Well, they're still out there. Some countries in the world still use them. We have this thing called PFTE, polytetrafluoroethylene, and the PFOA we just talked about, and that's used to make Teflon, something that all of us have had in use forever. But PFASs are hormone disruptors. If you take a look at newborn babies, they're in there because the mother's had it in her system. It's been in our foods forever. It's a lot of different places it's come about. They know for sure that it's responsible for kidney and testicular cancer. We know we have problems with liver and thyroid. Because it's a hormone disruptor, there's reproductive issues, particularly nowadays with the pandemic. They know that these kinds of forever chemicals have an impact on our immune system. Our immune system is not near as effective as it used to be because of them. And it also affects the vaccines we take. So if we're sitting there and we have a high amount of PFASs in our body and we get the vaccine, well, the vaccine has its own inherent issues with safety in general. But just as we may have chronic health issues, having a lot of PFASs in our body is another issue that we need to address, because it's something that we can become aware of and choose not to put as many of them as possible. You know, they've been testing for it for a long time. They've known the health hazard since the 60s. A lot of lawsuits out there, particularly dealing with groundwater. And these are things that are going on just within the last couple of years and you wonder, why is it still? Because that groundwater has been contaminated forever and it leaches out and it's just there. Plus the fact that we still have consumer products using some of these things, food packaging primarily. You have a takeout container, a doggy bag you get from the restaurant you're at, a pizza box, microwave popcorn bags, even some of these environmentally friendly, what they call compostable bowls, the compost that they reuse to recycle everything, nonstick cookware, we've already talked about Teflon. So when you start seeing these labels on some of these particular products, this is PFOA free, does not mean PFAS free, because there's other chemicals. Like I said, over 9,000 of them, and there's just a lot of them out there. And not only are they in the food industry and in the packaging, we also see them in cosmetics. Sometimes you'll see a little label on the cosmetic that says it's green or sustainable. Well, there's enough PFASs in those cosmetics to become a problem. PFASs make things last longer. It's like a preservative. It makes it easier to spread. So you have something that cakes on as you're putting it on. Well, the chemical that they use just makes the thing just slide right on, and just makes it so it just really enhances the ability to apply it to make it last longer. Sometimes these things are intentionally added. Sometimes it's a result of cross-contamination. They're using similar equipment that had some of these chemicals in them earlier. They weren't fully clean before they started a new batch of something, and that cross-contamination happens in a lot of things that you'd be surprised how many times that contamination from not fully cleaning something to start with is a problem. Every single state, if you were to test their water supplies and landfills, you're going to find some level of PFASs. They're forever chemical. The only thing we can do is hopefully not get as many in our body, and we can excrete as many as we can. But there was a recent test by FDA, and they found that 39 out of 100 water bottles. We would think that, okay, the water is distilled, it's as clean as it possibly can get, yet the plastic in the water bottle contains the PFAS. And that's, you're thinking, okay, I'm being healthy, I'm not getting the water out of the tap, but you're still exposed, and that's an issue. So well, let's go ahead and take another look at the EWG website. And at the top right-hand corner says creator of Skin Deep database, tap water database, and some EWG verified products. Well, if you tap on that tap water database, that's where I got my information with regard to my zip code, what chemicals are in there, to what levels are they. And on any one of those chemicals, I can click on arsenic, and it's going to give me details as to what levels of chemical toxicity there are, what health issues might be related to them. And so each one of those things has a level. And as we get into it, we're going to find out that you can go even deeper than that. So the next slide that comes up here. So I picked out one in particular, Dial White Tea and Vitamin E soap. Dial has a good reputation. You think, okay, white tea, think vitamin E, hand soap, moisturizer. But on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most concerning, the one that probably might be the most toxic if you use it enough, this particular one comes up with a 5. And as I'm looking at it, they have a color code for cancer. They have a color code for allergies, another color code for reproductibility, and another one for, use restrictions. So if it's a green, everything's healthy. If it's a red or an orange, there's a caution there. And so you can go down each one of these things in the Dial soap and look at what are they and how do they affect you and how much is in there, and do I need to really have a concern about it? So if I want to look a little bit further in that, and I see the Dial soap, I have a hazard score. This is the Skin Deep part of the thing we were looking at a minute ago. And the hazard score is from 0 to 10. We just talked about that. And as we're going through there, the average is not necessarily the average of all the ingredients in there. The average is a weight balance. So if I have one item in there that's 9 and 10 items in there that are 2, it's not going to be the average of 5.5. It's going to be an average probably closer to 3 or 4, because they weight average what is the amount of stuff in there and how seriously can it affect your health. And so those are the things that they're looking at on the hazard score. Now they look at another aspect of that in that same literally right next door to it on the same page is a thing called the data availability. And this is one where you're looking at on the lower end, 0 or 1, it's very low, almost non-existent. Then you have a moderate availability. You put it on a couple times a day, you're going to have some level of effect, or some high availability. And it tries to give you a quantitative and a subjective assessment. If I'm only going to be using the sunblock once a day, okay. If I'm only going to be using it on my vacation to Tahiti, I'm going to be down there 10 days, okay. I'm not going to be using it the rest of the year. But if I'm applying it 3 times a day, I'm going to the golf course, I'm coming home laying by the pool, a different level of availability that those chemicals getting into my body. And so it gives you some really good information with regard to what's going on. What do I need to worry about? If I look at what are the toxins in that same Dove soap, back over here, and I think it's about 24 of them. I just happen to pick out one. Okay, fragrance. If you see the word fragrance on something, that's a code word saying, I'm not going to tell you exactly what that fragrance is. It's just it can be any one of 100 or more different chemicals, but that fragrance is what we smell, that odor, that aroma, whatever it may happen to be. And when you start seeing fragrance with a red nomenclature, okay, that is something that is available. And because it's red, it's more of a hazard than something else. Down at the bottom, they have tetrasodium EDTA, ethylene diamine tetracetic acid. That EDTA is one that's, okay, it's a low number 2, not very available. So something we don't have to worry about from a safety perspective. But if I get up there to zinc sulfate or I get up there to dimethylloramine, those are ones that, yeah, if I start using this product a lot, then I might start having a problem. But anything that's a color, a fragrance, those are things that generally are a major problem in industry. If I want to start looking for something outside of those things, I have another thing I can dive down into, other products. And these are baby food and beverages and groceries. I mean, groceries, you can literally look up a product by its own name. I did that for one of the ones here. Let's see, I think it's a granola bar or something. Yeah. Pop up the granola bar. And it's going to give you a lot of information. In this particular case, they're saying that there's a score 4.0, and they're saying that this thing here appears somewhere between 1.0 and 10.0, and it's not quite a healthy one, even though it says organic. In fact, I saw something today on organic, a lot of problems with the organic label being applied to products that they're not organic at all. The company just decided to put the word organic on there. And if you look at labels, just because it says organic doesn't necessarily guarantee they are organic. Organic has an interpretation that means a certain thing. If you have GMO, genetically modified corn, for instance, you're buying a corn and it has genetic modifications to it, that's not organic. But you'll see companies that put organic on there. And so the labels mean something. When I'm buying eggs, I want the eggs that are not cage free. I want them, obviously, but I want the ones that say pasture as opposed to just cage free. I want to know where those chickens had their source of food, where they run around. Same thing with salmon. I don't buy farm raised salmon. I try to buy the stuff that's caught. Now, it's not as bad as farm raised because there's a lot of extra color and other things added in there. But the industry has a lot of things that are added to things. And this is a very, very good source of just taking what products do you use all the time? Pop it in here, buy the brand name. This is Canadian Farm Organic Blueberry Vanilla Flavored Chewy Granola Bars, Blueberry Vanilla. And unless they're actually using blueberries and vanilla, and sometimes you pop in there and take, well, they're just using a fragrance to give you that vanilla. Vanilla is a very easy chemical to, like bananas is another one. There are some chemicals that you smell, my God, where are the bananas at? Because they just reek with that odor of bananas or vanilla or whatever it may happen to be. But this one gives you a really good assessment quantitatively and qualitatively of how healthy is that particular food. And when you start having those kinds of things, that gives you the ability to control what you're eating. So if I'm looking for a granola bar and I have a choice between something that's 2.0 and 6.0, And the 6.0, it may taste a whole lot better because it has the extra toxins and the preservatives, the things that make it nice and chewy and unctuous, and the texture in the mouth. Those things go a long ways. But if I'm trying to get something that's really healthy, it might not necessarily taste as good, but that's the trade-off we're giving. And one of the programs in the future, I'm going to be talking about, well, here's a product here, but if you get this product over here, it's just as good, but has a 90% less toxins in it. So it's like forever. We're going to be faced with these things. The Europeans dictate, you can't put these things in here. We know America, literally anything goes. And unless something really and truly has a serious health effect, it's out there. It gets eventually settled by a lawsuit. And if the lawsuit is big enough, they'll start making changes. If not, well, then they say, well, we can handle another lawsuit or whatever it may happen to be. There's just too many options out there. But we have the options for the good stuff, and we have the options for the bad stuff. And so it's awareness. After today, environmental working group doesn't sound like much of a toxin thing, but environment, the working group is one that looked into the environment and has really categorized very, very well the toxins that are all aspects of our everyday life, from the clothes we wear to the services we get for cleaning, to the foods we eat, to the cosmetics we put on, personal care products, shampoos, everything. Those things are all in that system. Thousands of items assessed against each other. I think I did a quick search on baby shampoo, and there's 234 different brands of baby shampoo. Some absolutely harmless, other ones a concern. And so if you have a concern, ewg.org, go there, wander around, dive down some rabbit holes. They got lots of articles. Put your email in there. They'll send you a guide, lots and lots of guides on information. So if it's something that is near and dear to your heart, I think this is a very, very, very good source, something that you can use for your everyday buying pleasure. And with that, let me go ahead and pull up my last slide here. I can be found at redolaughlin.com. That's REDOLAUGHLIN. Red like the color, O'Laughlin, OLAUGHLIN. 2 books that I have available on my website and on Amazon, Joy of Ageless Health. It talks about the 6 or 7 primary pathways that disease begins to grow in our body. We talk about stress and toxins and radiation, inflammation, infection, diet, and even expectations. And what can we do about it? Inflammation is constantly in our body. We leave it unchecked. We get oxidative stress, and things start changing with regard to our DNA having modifications, mutations, and then our disease. Now, these things don't occur overnight. They take a long time. But anyway, I talk about that in that one. Longevity Secrets for Healthy Aging. I talk about the 2 primary causes of aging, your degradation in production of human growth hormone as we get older, and what you can do about it. You can increase your human growth hormone at 75 years of age back to almost what you were as a teenager on a daily basis. But unless you know what to do, chances are nothing's going to happen. Same thing with the DNA. At the end of the DNA, every time that your DNA splits and forms 2 new molecules, 2 new atoms, you lose a little bit of the bottom part of your DNA. It's called a telomere. And as those things erode over time, that determines how long you're going to live, and in some cases, even the quality of your life. So given that being the case, I'm concluding with program number 3 out of 6 on toxins and health on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. And I thank you very much for joining us today. Bye now.